Sub-Saharan Africa will suffer its first recession in 25 years as the coronavirus pandemic brings economies to a halt and disrupts global trade. Gross domestic product in the region will probably shrink between 2.1 and 5.1% in the year 2020, compared with 2.4% growth last year, on account of large contractions in South Africa and Nigeria and Angola, the three biggest economies in Africa. The growth downgrade is based on a sharp decline in the output in key trading partners such as China and the Euro area, falling commodity prices, reduced tourism, and measures taken to contain the virus. World Bank estimates the virus outbreak will cost Sub-Saharan Africa between $37 and $79 billion as a result of disruptions to trade and value chains. Now, African countries have 10,692 confirmed cases of the COVID-19 virus to date, with 535 deaths and 1,096 recoveries, according to data compiled by the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Now, the pandemic will have a substantial impact on food production and could lead to a food security crisis in the region. Agricultural production is likely to decline by 2.6% and as much as 7% with trade blockages. Food imports could tumble as much as 25% on higher transaction costs and reduced domestic demand. Now, meanwhile, the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation in all of this has assured Nigerians of petroleum product supply to guarantee hitch-free, Easter celebrations and even beyond. The NNPC Group Managing Group Public Affairs Division, Dr. Kenny Obateru, said the corporation has 2.5 billion liters both in marine and inland depots. The Association of Nigerian Electricity Distributors, ANED, also announced that it's aligning with the federal government and the National Assembly's efforts to provide free electricity for 2 months as a palliative for the effects, of the coronavirus pandemic on the Nigerian electricity sector. Now, the energy to be supplied for the 2 months is not free from the discos, but it's being paid for by the federal government in partnership with the National Assembly. Now, as such, the ability for the discos to go forward is subject to the stimulus package being passed by the National Assembly and signed into law by Mr. President. Let's make more sense of this now. I have joining me via Skype from Lekki Phase 1, the immediate past president of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. He's a professor of economics, Professor Segun Ajibola. Thank you very much, Prof, for joining us on the show.
And good afternoon.
Yes, Prof, let's start with these projections. We see the World Bank, we see the IMF coming back to readjust some of the figures that were ruled out before now. What do you think is happening? What is responsible for this change in projections? Let me put it that way.
Well, the global economy is under severe stress at the moment. COVID-19 pandemic is creating a lot of dislocations here and there. We know that at the moment, the global economy is locked down. Nothing is happening. There is no production, apps or services, and if any at all, it's very minimal. The key economies of the world are stressed. But there is consumption continues, because when there is life, there must be consumption. So if production is down, definitely it will impact the volume of economic activities globally, and with developing economies like Nigeria taking a very big bite. So with the COVID, with problems of international relations taking a very, very big cut, with bilateral and multilateral relations suffering major setback, with key sectors of the economy unable to perform. And of course, even in terms of the agricultural sector, we all know that so many countries depend on China today, fortunately or unfortunately, for even key inputs into the agricultural sector, some implements, some equipment, and with that suffering a major setback with key airports, seaports locked down. It will definitely slow down the volume of economic activities. So it is just question of, it's the literal interpretation, the literal side effect and aftermath of all that is slump in the volume of economic activities. Gross domestic product will definitely go down south, and the rate of economic growth will slow down significantly compared with the projections for 2020 that were made towards the end of year 2019. So what we are seeing are mere direct reactions, direct aftermath, the effects, the multiplier effects of COVID-19 that has locked down the global economy.
Now, Prof, let me ask you this question. Over the weekend, we saw OPEC and non-OPEC members meeting to talk about crude oil, or the price of crude oil, which is something that is very important for a country like Nigeria. Finally, they've agreed to a quote at about 9.7 million barrels per day. Now, do you see this? What are the positives you see in this for Nigeria?
Nigeria economy has been so over monolithic, and when the global oil market sneezes, the Nigeria's economy catches a cold. Unfortunately, that has always been the case. And you will recall that recently, the 2020 budget was reviewed based on what was happening in the global oil market. And the projection was cleared down in terms of volume and in terms of price per barrel of oil from $57 to $30. Now the question is, the market is still unsettled. The global oil politics is very, very complex. OPEC, non-OPEC, cut in volume, cut in price. So the interplay of forces in the global oil market is always very, very tricky. So we know that whatever happens to the global oil market, global oil prices, global oil volume will have significant effect on the performance of Nigeria's economy. The cutback in volume, if that will be sustained, because we all know the kind of trade-offs between the OPEC countries and the non-OPEC countries. Russia, Saudi Arabia as a good example, representing both sides. But if that is sustained, then we could say that that will ensure some stability in the oil price in the market. Nigeria's economy is looking at $30 per barrel for a revised 2020 budget. So if that cut by about 10 billion barrels per day is sustained, then we can say that there is hope that the $30 per barrel projection will be sustained. But there is no assurance that there will be some trade-off here and there, and the agreement of today will be jettisoned tomorrow. So all we can hope for is that COVID-19 will have a definite a deadline to bid farewell to this modern earth. If that happens, then we can see some stability. For now, it is just hope upon hope, because the complexity of the politics that govern international oil market, they are so difficult to manage. They are so difficult to project. They are so difficult to predict.
True.
So we can only hope. But if that cut can be sustained and some stability in the price per barrel of oil can be maintained, then we can see there's hope for the revised 2020 budget for Nigeria.
Indeed, revised 2020 budget. Now, also in this figure released by the World Bank, it says that countries in Sub-Saharan Africa will lose about $37 billion to $79 billion. That's in that range. A lot of deals will be broken. A lot of contracts signed already would not be executed because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, how do you see this playing out, moving on, even after we now get off the lockdown and people start to get to work gradually? How long would the transition period be, if I'm allowed to use that word?
Well, what IMF, World Bank, even the local analysts and other international financial analysts, what they are saying, I mean, it's obvious. The economy, the global economy is locked down. Sub-Saharan Africa is no exception. No economic activities going on. Gross domestic product here and there is taking a big bite, going down south. How will they be able to sustain those agreements when nothing is happening? When airports are locked down, when seaports are locked down, when international bilateral, multilateral agreements cannot be executed, cannot even be implemented. So the aftermath is the default here and there, inability to perform here and there. The figures they are quoting, well, we want to know, based on what assumptions? COVID-19 is here with us. COVID-19 has not told anybody, this is my exit date. So how are we arriving at the projections? How are we arriving at $27 billion, $25 billion, and so on and so forth? All that we know for now, for certain, is that most economies of the world, developing, developed, G20, G7, whatever, will experience some difficulties, will experience some slump in 2020 and beyond. And some are already predicting economic recession, and we pray it will not go into depression here and there, so that multilateral agreement will be dishonored, will be unable to see the light of the day, that there will be loss in GDP, there will be loss in this and that. It's saying the obvious. The loss is already here with us. We have seen it very glaringly. So whether you are talking of United States of America, whether you are talking of European countries, whether you are talking of Sub-Saharan African countries, we are in it. We are witnessing the problems posed by COVID-19. And we are all just struggling and even praying that COVID-19 will have an early exit date. Our countries can come together, rally, runs together to see how we can rebuild and they remove the devastating effects or limit the devastating effects of COVID-19 on global economic space. So saying that it will have all these effects is saying the obvious. And it's not only Sub-Saharan Africa. I don't think there is any part of the world today
that it won't affect.
That says immune to the devastating effects of COVID-19.
Prof, let me take you now down to stimulus and interventions from all of the banks, the central banks, investment banks, AFDB, and what we've been seeing coming in even to a country like Nigeria. How well do you see us managing this? A country of 200 million people. We know what's already happening in some locations in Lagos. Already people are out getting very aggressive. Now, what do you think, or what can be done by government to at least let people really understand that, yes, you have to stay at home for your own good, and one way or the other, something comes in even while they stay at home? That's talking about less vulnerable people and those that really need from government.
You know, we are a country of about 200 million human beings, 60–70% of which depend on daily hustles to make a living. So if 60–70% of Nigerians do not go out in a day, they cannot guarantee means of livelihood for that day. So that is the main challenge we have. And when we talk high state, government institutions and agencies can go. to feed about 60–70% of the population on a daily basis until the end of COVID-19 or until the end of the lockdown, which nobody, except the Almighty God that we are praying to, can predict. So it's a very, very difficult dislocating disequilibrium factor in our national life. We only pray that first, the rampaging effects and the transmission mechanisms that government institutions and agencies will be able to devise come up with workable formula to curb that transmission, what we call community transmission now. But I tell you, even in so many parts of Lagos, we can see the uprising gathering momentum. So it's a very difficult situation for any government managing this kind of population to handle. Very, very tough. And the economic stimulus package, especially coming from the side of Central Bank of Nigeria, I think Central Bank is looking ahead, being proactive in saying what can we do to reposition the economy of Nigeria with this kind of population, with the challenging and devastating effects of COVID-19 on the various sectors of the economy. What can the financial services sector do to bring to life this kind of economy? So that stimulus package is well-intentioned and I think is well-defined. We only pray that COVID-19, I keep repeating, will have an early exit date so that the stimulus package, either from the side of the Central Bank of Nigeria or other agencies of government, they'll be able to roll out and kickstart the Nigerian economy again, especially as we look forward to what happens to the 2020 budget.
All right, Professor Segun Ajibola there. He's the immediate past president of the Chartered Institute of Bankers of Nigeria. He's a professor of economics. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us today on Business Nigeria.